The FBI has been secretly flying over our homes right here in the valley with equipment designed to track phone calls and record video.
Pentagon officials are telling CBS News tonight they are monitoring a suspected Chinese spy balloon that's been flying at high altitude over the U.S.
Confrontation in the skies between U.S. fighter jets and nuclear-capable Russian bombers not far from American shores.
An unarmed Russian Air Force jet flew over several key landmarks here in the Washington area at low altitude today, including the Capitol, the Pentagon, CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and Joint Base Andrews, home of Air Force One, of course. The flight was part of a long-standing treaty that allows militaries of the U.S. and Russia to observe the other from the air.
The Aerial Investigative Research, or AIR, pilot program flew over Baltimore City for 6 months, and the city's spending board officially nixed it in February. A ruling filed Thursday says the persistent surveillance violated the Constitution.
With a lot of people becoming aware of how widespread government surveillance really is, inevitably people start getting interested with tracking certain aircraft. The widespread use of aerial assets to target innocent civilians during the past few years, the use of intelligence collection assets on U.S. soil, and even things like the actions of the rich and famous to conceal the location of their personal aircraft have all resulted in a lot of people looking to the skies above them and starting to notice what's going on up there. Now, what if I were to tell you that you can track spy planes that may or may not be flying over your head collecting intelligence on you right now? What if you could track the same aircraft that conducted the rendition flights of the 2000s, or even the aircraft flown by rich and powerful people around the globe? How about Air Force One or military aircraft or sophisticated intelligence collection assets? And what if you could do all of this without internet access from a simple tablet or laptop in the middle of the woods? It may sound a bit difficult, but if we take this step by step, it's not too hard. So let's get right to it. One of the things that will help you right off the bat is to take a look at the video we did previously on the topic of tactical SIGINT. You really don't have to, I guess, but it will make a lot more sense if you do, since I cover the installation of the main software package that we're going to be talking about today, which is PlanePlotter. PlanePlotter is a software package that, when used in conjunction with an SDR dongle, helps us to recognize and visualize ADS-B transponder data from aircraft. Again, we covered the basics of this in the first video on this topic, in which we figured out how to track basic aircraft. Getting all of this to work first is a prerequisite for what we're about to do. Alright, so let's dive right into this. If you have PlanePlotter working and you're able to receive different kinds of aircraft and you're all set up to go on that front, now we can start bringing in the database. There are two main ways to do this. You can do things the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is to just use the file that I provide you below. This is a file that I have compiled myself using a lot of open source sources. And the hard way is to do the file yourself, create the file from scratch. Now, we're going to cover both ways, but we'll cover the easy way first. So if you download the file that I have provided below, the Basestation.sqb file, you should get it somewhere in your downloads folder, and it will go right here in your log files folder. Now, if you install PlanePlotter just to your routine C drive, it's going to be in local disk C drive right there, Tools, COAA, PlanePlotter log files. So that's where your base station file is going to go. Now, remember, if you download PlanePlotter and install it, you're not going to get this file. You have to download it yourself, which I'll show you how to do later. PlanePlotter installs with an empty file. You can leave that there, that's no problem. But if you want to use the file that I provide to you, just go ahead and add that file right to your log file folder. So there we go, that's it. You are pretty much done. Now we can launch PlanePlotter. Once we bring PlanePlotter up, we can confirm and make sure that PlanePlotter is actually receiving and working off of that base station file. So we go to Options, Directories, SQB Aircraft Database, and there we go. It is running off of Basestation.sqb. You can delete the empty one or you can just leave it there. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is the file has to be named Basestation.sqb. Otherwise, PlanePlotter is not going to recognize it. But you can define a different database here if you wish. So we're just going to use Basestation.sqb, the default configuration. Now, to get fully set up with alerts, what we're going to do is kind of backtrack to what we talked about in the first SIGINT video, and we're going to set up some alerts. So we're going to go over here to Options, Alert, Alert Fields, and what we're going to do is make sure that what we want is tagged, right? So what I personally like is I like to keep the registration number. That's handy if you're tracking multiple aircraft types. I want to know the altitude because I want to be able to look down at a quick glance at the alert notification and see, all right, is this a low-level asset or is this at like cruising altitude? I want to know how far away it is from me if we have that data available. And I want to know what user tag I have given this, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about putting together the file itself. And I want to make sure that we get alerts for all interested aircraft. So interested is the tag, it is the categorization of aircraft that PlanePlotter uses to say, hey, this is an important aircraft. That's just the word they've chosen. Interested is a good kind of word. If you are interested in an aircraft, you can tag it as interested in the database, and you can now use this for alerts and a bunch of other different cool stuff we can talk about later. If you have a lot of different alerts set up, checking the alert origin would be very handy because that will let you know what kind of alert you got. Is this an interested aircraft, or is this alert that I'm getting because of a new aircraft or because of an aircraft that flies into my tracking zone? You know, whatever you want to set up, the alert origin tag there might be helpful. So I'm just going to leave that turned on. Doesn't really matter for this. Now, as a side note, before we kind of conclude the easy way of doing things, if you are in an area in which you get a lot of aircraft overhead, like if you're out in Texas near a few of the training bases for military aircraft, or if you're up and down the East Coast and you get a lot of cargo aircraft, you might want to set alert zones rather than just all alerts, because what this configuration I've just set up will do is alert you, give you an alert on your interface here. It will send an alert whenever any of these interested aircraft are detected. And you might not want that if you are near like a training base or something where you might get constantly, just get bombarded with alerts, and you really don't care about, training jets so much. You might want to set up alert zones. So what we can do for that is go to Options, Alert, Alert Zone, Add, and we can just draw a little polygon here. Then go back to Options, Alert, Alert Zone, and uncheck Add. And one more thing, we can go to Options, Alert, let's see here, Alert Zone, and make sure Exclusive is checked. Now what that's going to do is make it so that not every aircraft that flies into this zone will be alerted. So it can get kind of confusing with the alerts, so let me try to explain that a little bit clearer. If you just leave this as an alert zone, you will get an alert on your screen every single time any aircraft whatsoever flies into this little polygon here. You might not want that. We covered that in the first video. If you're kind of interested in tracking every aircraft, that's fine, but for me, I live on the East Coast, so there are kind of a lot of different aircraft flying by at any given time, and I just get constant alerts. So I want to get alerts when an interested aircraft flies within this polygon here. So by leaving that as exclusive, by leaving that tag on, that means that exclusively aircraft that are interested will fly into this zone and then trigger an alert. So it's kind of handy if you want to do that to make sure that you don't get so many alerts moving forward. Now you might be asking, what is this going to do? What kinds of aircraft are going to trigger an alert? Well, to explain that, let's talk about how this file is made, this mystery database file, right? This Basestation.sqb file. What is the deal with this mystery base station file? And what information is going to get pulled into PlanePlotter? So to do that, let's talk about how to do this whole process from scratch, from the very start. So from the very start, this base station file, Basestation.sqb, that is the master database of a lot of different aircraft. As of right now, of the publishing of this video, it's around 197,000 different airframes that are actually in this file. It is a master database of every single aircraft in the world. almost. There are quite a few missing, but it is basically a database of all of the aircraft that plane plotter users have detected, logged, and distributed to the plane plotter system if you were connected and feeding in data to it. So it's not every aircraft in the world, but it's a good chunk of the airframes we have flying around the planet. Essentially what we are doing is taking this base station file and tagging different aircraft with different things, right? So that we're able to get an alert instead of any aircraft. We want to only focus on certain aircraft like spy planes, right? So to do that, we need to get the base station file. Like I mentioned before, the base station file is not included when you install Plane Plotter. You need to download that after you install. Let me show you how to do that. First, we go to Options, scroll down to SQB Hex Database Options, and click Fetch SQB Hex Database. Now, when I click that, it is going to start downloading that file to my log files folder. If I already have a base station file there, it is going to overwrite it, as far as I know. So make sure that you don't already have one there. If you already have a base station file there, you can save it to another place and then kind of merge them later. But if you're using the file that I give you, you're going to erase it and start from scratch. So just make sure you're keeping tabs on which files you're using, and also make sure once you download this, if you're starting from absolute scratch and you've never downloaded this before, make sure once you download it to make a copy so that you don't mess anything up later. You can, of course, just re-download it if you want through this, through Plane Plotter, but it's just easier just to keep a copy just so that you don't make any mistakes. Once you have that downloaded, we can start to edit it and actually view the data that's inside this database file. But to do that, you actually need a third-party program. And the one that I'm using is some free software called DB Browser for SQLite, or SQLite, right? So here is what I'm using for this. The installation is pretty easy. You can get it from the website that I showed you. The link is below, of course. And once you install this, it's pretty simple to install. We can now load the database into this. It could not be easier. Just up here at the top left, click Open Database. And we are going to navigate to where we have our database file stored. So let me make sure that I'm getting the right one here. And make sure to click all file extensions, otherwise it might not show up. So right here is where I have mine saved. Here's the installation file you're going to get, and this is the Basestation.sqb that I'm going to be working out of. So let me go ahead and open that. And you're going to get a lot of gibberish if you don't understand what database files look like. Once we load that database file in, we can click Browse Data in the upper left-hand corner right here. And here are all of our aircraft. As we can see, if we scroll down to the very bottom of the list, we have a little over 195,000 aircraft. Now, granted, a lot of these I've put in myself because they were not in the original database. I put in some aircraft that are either deregistered or they've been sold to somebody else. But we'll talk about the data sources here in a minute. Really what we need to focus on are a few different parts of the toolbar up here. Right here is your registration number. This is the tail number. In the United States, it is called an N number that delineates the registration for the aircraft. That's the most important number because from the registration number, you can get a lot of stuff. So just keep in mind the registration number, the N number, the tail number is very, very important. We can also scroll over here and see different kinds of manufacturers, and if we scroll all the way over here, the other column that you need to know about is registered owners. Now this is going to change quite a lot because people, buy and sell different aircraft, but if a government agency owns an aircraft, it's probably going to be right here. Now moving over quite a bit to the far side of this spreadsheet here, we have the interested column. Now this is a very important column. This is how you're going to tag different aircraft as being interested. Remember when I showed you the easy way of doing things, we set up the alerts to alert us if an interested aircraft does something. If we detect it at all, it's going to get an alert, or if it flies into a zone, we're going to get an alert. That's how you're able to determine the difference between, say, an aircraft that you don't really care about and aircraft that you are interested in, thus the tag here. So in this database, a value of 0 means you are not interested in the aircraft and it's not going to trigger anything. And a value of 1 means you are interested. That is now tagged as an interested aircraft. Right beside the interested column is a column called user tag. Now, if you remember, again, this is another field, another data field that will pop up in our alert column. So what I use the user tag column for is to let me know what kind of aircraft this is with regards to like capabilities. So if we scroll down to the bottom here of my own little personal database, we can see that if I get some kind of indication, some kind of notification through open source intelligence, processing and stuff like that, that an airframe is somehow linked to a federal agency with regards to surveillance, I'll put it there. I'll put spy plane. That's just an easy, quick way for me to look down at a tablet or look at a computer screen, out in the field and say, oh, okay, spy plane overhead. Now, it doesn't have to be just spy plane. You can make it be anything you want. So let me actually sort my user tag here. As you can see, most of the aircraft in the world don't really have anything, but some aircraft do. So like transport aircraft, I have tagged a lot of, let's say, CH-47, CH-47 Chinooks. So those are transport aircraft, right? And we can define any kind of tag we want. We've got fuelers, we've got all different kinds of things, right? So this is how you were to edit this file. Now, I have not done every aircraft in the world like this. I've only done the ones that I've gotten to so far. So I may end up updating this in the future, just to let you know. But that's how you were to tag aircraft if you were kind of interested in them. And that's pretty much all the data fields that I really care about. Also, if you wanted to add your own aircraft, say you were to go online and do a little Google foo or searching online in some way, and you find an aircraft, a tail number of an aircraft that is suspicious, or someone somewhere in the ether of the internet thinks that it is linked to a national intelligence service, not even just American, but other nations' intelligence services, and you're kind of concerned about that potential surveillance aircraft, and you put the registration number in here and it doesn't come up with anything. Well, you can then put your own aircraft in. So you can go right here and add another aircraft to the very bottom row. Now, there are some requirements for putting this in this particular database. You must know the registration number, and you also must know the mode S transponder code, the little 6-digit hex code that is assigned to the aircraft's transponder. There are ways to put this in the database without this, but it's very strongly recommended to have this because you can find it very easily. Usually when you look up the registration number, that hex number will be there. That mode S transponder number will be there. Now, I can explain what that is and what that's used for a little bit later, because it doesn't help us now, but you're going to need it later for some other stuff that we're going to talk about in future videos. So that's pretty much it. Once you have added the aircraft you want, or if you've tagged things as interested, or you've added little user tags to things, you click Write Changes right there, and that will write those changes to the database. Then you bring in that file again to Plane Plotter, and there you go. You've just, created your own interested database. Now the grand question becomes, what aircraft do I want to tag as interested, and what aircraft have I tagged as interested if you're using my base station file? So let's go ahead and sort this by interested, and I'll just run down some of the aircraft that I find are interesting. So first of all, I have tagged a little over 13,000 aircraft as being interested for me. Now, most of these that I'm super interested in, the ones that I have marked as spy planes, are aircraft that are linked with either FBI or CIA or DHS surveillance on American soil. Now, again, where did I get these numbers from? Well, it's pretty simple. We can go to really the internet, right? And we can find a lot of stories. BuzzFeed a few years ago had a news article regarding aerial surveillance. They did a whole expose on the FBI's secret front companies and the DHS's secret front companies that actually are companies that don't really exist at all, but the FBI is using them as a front name to run surveillance aircraft, right? Because when you go to the FAA's website, right, and you search for an N number, it's going to come up with registration, but it's not going to have FBI, right? It's going to have some front company. So a lot of the times in the OSINT world, especially when it comes to surveillance, you're going to get possible. Possible is one of those probabilistic language terms that we used to say, we don't really know what this is, but we know that it's important enough to track it. And that's my criteria for putting it on the list and tagging it as interested. I don't have, proof beyond all doubt that these aircraft are being used as spy aircraft, but I can get pretty close, right? So that's pretty much where I'm getting all of these spy plane tail numbers, at least for the FBI and DHS. Now, most of the Department of Homeland Security aircraft are listed as such in this database. FBI, not so much. We had to go and find the front companies that they're registering these aircraft underneath, still to this day, or put them in myself. So a lot of these are going to be aircraft that are not being used anymore. After the story kind of broke in the 2015-2016 timeframe, a lot of these aircraft were decommissioned, they were deregistered, or they let the registrations expire. So yeah, this is really just a list of random tail numbers I was able to find on a bunch of random different websites just by Googling around and seeing what I could find. Something else that can help you quite a lot is history. So if we were able to just Google around or are kind of old enough to remember the rendition scandals of the past, those CIA torture flights outside the country, we can find a few companies that still exist, like Tepper Aviation. This company is one of the operating companies for the Central Intelligence Agency, and they're still active to this day. As we can see, it looks like a normal, aviation company, except for the fact that they maintain two C-130 platforms, right? Two different serial numbers. So again, who knows what they're up to? Both of these aircraft, or at least I think one of them was spotted in Iraq, Syria, the past couple of years, so they're still very much being used, and I want to make sure that I'm tagging these as well to make sure that I know that it's Tepper Aviation. So kind of an interesting way of keeping an eye on one of the CIA's companies that they use for different kinds of things like that. So if you Google rendition flights, you can find a lot of different companies that you can either search for or add yourself, and a lot of different tail numbers to add as well. Again, most of those are not being used anymore. Most of the rendition planes have either been sold or scrapped or decommissioned in some way, so I didn't put them on this master list. What I did put on this master list, besides the obvious spy aircraft, are pretty much every military aircraft in the world, or at least the ones that I could sort and find very easily. Again, this is a total of 13,000-ish aircraft, so forgive me if there's a few aircraft that are, missed, or ones that I've tagged and I probably shouldn't have tagged because they're like museum pieces now. But as you can see, I've tagged most of the police aircraft, Air Force aircraft, things like that, the U.S. Army's aircraft. If it's tagged, it's, if it's got the word Army or Air Force in the name, that's how I kind of found those. So yeah, a lot of these are going to be cargo aircraft. Let me see if I could scroll down and find some of the more interesting ones. Let's see here, UH-60s, MH-60s, yeah, easy day, tracking Blackhawks is kind of interesting. Again, most of these aircraft, they're not going to be flying around with their transponder on, or it's going to be in like mode S if that's what they have, and you're not going to see them on the map. Again, same thing for instance with the Russian Air Force. Just as an FYI, most Russian military aircraft you're not going to see on any ADS-B platform. They just don't fly with their transponders on. They do not really care about civilian traffic. That's just the way things are. So if you see one of these, it's going to be pretty rare, at least from what I've seen. So let's scroll down here and find some of the more interesting ones. We can sort by type actually as well, and that might help a little bit. Some of these are kind of interesting aircraft that you might not have realized are there. Actually, let's go and search by type for VC-25. I know that one off the top of my head. So this is a VC-25 A and B variant run by the United States Air Force, and as you can see, I have them tagged as interested. You might know this platform as Air Force One, at least when the president is on board. Again, certain kinds of aircraft, if you're using online tracking services like Flight Radar 24 or ADS-B Exchange or since ADSB Exchange has had some kind of drama with regards to ownership, that might be a less reliable source, or it might go to a different domain name in the future. But you get my drift. Any online source has the potential for being filtered. And for instance, these aircraft right here, you will not find on Flight Radar 24, because Flight Radar 24 specifically cooperates, willfully and joyfully with the U.S. government in censoring the location of assets like Air Force One. That's why if you were to have an offline source for tracking aircraft like Plane Plotter, you would get an alert whenever Air Force One flies overhead, and you'd be able to track it across the sky, because these aircraft, even though they are blacklisted a lot of times from these flight tracking websites, you're still going to be able to pick them up because they're flying in American airspace. They're going to have a transponder on most of the time. And again, if we're trying to pick what kind of aircraft that we are interested in, along those lines, I'm really interested in tracking forbidden aircraft that we're not supposed to track, right? In terms of intelligence collection, on U.S. soil, Air Force One is not really a really big concern. It's a transport aircraft, right? A command and control suite. It's kind of interesting. I think it's, fascinating airframe to follow, but it's not really a threat to me on the ground. And neither is Elon Musk's airplane. And this is a hot topic, right? This is one that he has in the past, said, the richest man in the world says that, he lets his aircraft be tracked on Twitter, and then suddenly he doesn't want that happening anymore. So you can actually see right here, very recently as December 20th, 2022, Wired is writing articles about how Elon Musk's private jet is conspicuously missing from the two main flight tracking platforms, FlightAware and Flight Radar 24. Interestingly, it's due to a lot of bureaucracy, but I think we all know how that happens. The richest man in the world doesn't want his plane on the internet, and so he is making it so. Interestingly enough, this particular news article right here has the tail number N628TS. So let's go ahead and grab that tail number and let's bring it in to our Plane Plotter database here. Let's see if we can remove that filter, and we can search by registration again. There it is. It is a Gulfstream G650ER extended range variant. And as we can see, I have already edited the name, putting Elon Musk right there, and I've also added the user tag Elon Musk. So again, not really a threat to me. It's just kind of interesting, and I personally like tracking things that very rich and powerful people don't want me to track. So I thought that was kind of an interesting addition to this database. So again, you can add whatever aircraft you want to the database. It's up to you. I have provided some of the aircraft I'm interested in tracking. I'm sure that as I find more and more interesting aircraft, I will add them to this list, and we'll see about updating it at some point. But this is a good start. And if you wanted to create your own, this is an even better start as well. If you're in a specific area, you might not want to run with the entire database of the world, these 13,000 different aircraft. You might want to run just the local aircraft that are in your area, or the ones that you are specifically interested in. The sky's the limit with this kind of stuff, and you can really do whatever you want to. So now that we've gotten our database all configured and running in Plane Plotter, let's talk about some of the disadvantages that this system brings. All of this is well and good, right? And it sounds like this is a really magical piece of software. And it really is helpful, but there are some disadvantages, not necessarily with the software, but just the nature of how ADSB works. If you haven't figured it out by now, the biggest disadvantage to this entire system is that you can only detect aircraft within a certain range of your location. You aren't going to be able to track aircraft around the world like you would using online ADSB tracking websites. Those websites get their data from platforms like this that are connected to the internet and feed in the data to these main tracking websites. So these are all networked together via the internet. Well, if you don't have internet, or you're trying to be, off-grid or something like that, you're not going to have the ability to feed into these platforms. That's why it's kind of important to have an offline ADSB platform, even though you're kind of limited to your local area. As kind of a side note, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have an online ADSB app or website or something when you're in the field. It's really better to go with an offline, completely blacked out, receive-only system, because if you're trying to avoid intelligence collection aircraft, then it wouldn't be a super great idea to only know about those aircraft because you're using a smartphone, right? That's kind of counterintuitive. If your detection system relies on you using a spy sensor, basically the most dense collection of spy sensors in the world, your smartphone, if that's what you have to use to access the internet to find out if there's a spy aircraft overhead, do you see how kind of backwards that is? So even though the disadvantage with this entire system is that you can only use it for a local area and it's not networked to the internet, that's really just the nature of the beast that you're going to have to kind of deal with for now. You can form ad hoc networks as needed and link up with friends or contacts you might have in local areas if you want. A real-world example of this is if there's a high-profile event going on in some city, some kind of civil unrest or a riot or something where I know there's going to be some kind of aerial asset collecting intelligence on the people on the ground, I can make contact with a friend or a local in the area, shoot them a text message or an email, and see if they see anything on their ADSB scope. There are some ways to automate this link, and we're working on some ways to do this without an internet connection at all, but for now, simple networks of aviation enthusiasts are very helpful for being aware of certain aircraft all around the world. Another main disadvantage of this process is that not every aircraft is on this list. You can, of course, add as many as you like if you find new ones, but not every aircraft even has ADSB. For instance, the classic B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, and also their sort of replacement, the brand new B-21 Raiders, don't have ADSB, so they're not going to show up no matter what. Sort of along those same lines, another big disadvantage to this is that this is all relying on an aircraft having their transponder turned on. I am sure the keyboard warriors in the comment section have pointed this out by now. If the pilot turns the transponder off, you can't track them anymore. This is completely true. However, as we have pointed out many times before, the most important word in that sentence is if. In the overwhelming number of cases, aircraft are going to keep their transponder turned on, even if they are doing sketchy or illegal stuff, at least in the United States or Western Europe where the airspace is super congested. Any secret squirrel up to no good who turns their transponder off is going to get lit up by every airport's radar anyway, and they are going to start getting interrogated by air traffic control to find out who they are and why they are breaking the rules by flying with their transponder turned off. Remember, most of the FBI's spy planes are registered under fictitious companies, so it's not like the dude sitting in the air traffic control tower can see that it's the FBI doing spooky stuff. They are going to treat that aircraft like it's anybody else. And in populated areas like major cities, any aircraft flying with their transponder off is going to get treated like it's a threat. And I'm just guessing, but I don't think the FBI agents in a random Cessna circling above Miami or Baltimore or wherever, I don't think they want to see an F-16 off their wing ordering them to land. So, the spy planes fly with their transponders on almost all of the time. The exception is obviously low-level flight in unrestricted airspace in the middle of nowhere. For those situations, we have to rely on some other tools to detect the ultra-spooky aircraft, which we can talk about later. The other main problem with this method as it stands is that to display the position of these aircraft on the map, the aircraft have to use specific transponder modes. Now, we're going to get more into this a little bit later, but for now, just know that some transponder modes do not require the aircraft to report its position. So in Plane Plotter, you won't see anything on the map, but you will see call signs, flight numbers, and registrations in the list of aircraft you are picking up. The good news is that with all of this work we've done today, you will still get the alert if an interested aircraft is detected. You just won't know where it is. For most intelligence collection, this is perfectly fine. If you can pick up an aircraft transponder, it can collect intelligence on you, so you don't really need to know exactly where it is, only that it's close enough to spy on you. And as a slight spoiler of a side note, there is a workaround for mapping aircraft that aren't transmitting their location, which we will be talking about later. It's really complicated, but it's well worth the effort if you can get it to work. But again, more on that later. For now, hopefully we can see the benefit of keeping an eye on certain aircraft and getting alerts when certain aircraft are overhead. Tracking aircraft with an ADS-B receiver is such a powerful capability, I can't put it into words. It's almost a freebie, a cheap tool that you can use to close the gap between powerful entities and normal people like us. With a total cost of about $50, you can make billions of dollars worth of surveillance tools completely irrelevant. When it comes to domestic spying, the FBI and the CIA know the power that ADS-B receivers have, but they can't really do anything about it, at least not yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother with shell corporations and potentially getting egg on their face when people like us find out about them. But they have to rely on these secrets because they know the power that the average citizen has. So get ahead of the curve and get your ADS-B receiver up and running. And using the features we've talked about today, you can set up alerts to take note of aircraft that you might want to know about when they start making slow left-hand turns around your location. In today's world, this could be a simple way to let you know when to turn your cell phone off. And something as simple as that can make all the difference in the world, especially if you are trying to fight in the shade.